Thames, one of Europe's most famous rivers and arguably England's most important. The role it plays in English history is so much part of each generation of schoolchildren's education that there can exist few people without some knowledge of this much-loved river. The Thames flows for almost 200 miles, passing through towns, villages and settlements that have witnessed the making of English history. In this series, we follow the river as far as Windsor, both on foot along the National Trail and on the water in a variety of boats. Our journey begins at the Thames head, its humble origin, beneath an ancient ash tree in an idyllic setting near Cirencester.
Looks like this is it, James.
Source of the Thames.
God. You know, I've always seen it as a big river, you know, from paddling at Windsor when we were kids to the tidal Thames down to the estuary, but never actually been here, where it all begins.
There's only one trouble.
There's no water.
No. They do say it's dry for at least 10 months of the year, and it's summer now.
This is the ash tree. With its humble beginnings.
And this supposedly is a spring.
Yeah.
Is there any water there at all?
Don't think so. No, it's dry. See what the stone says. The stone marker here. Conservators of the River Thames, 1857 to 1974. This stone was placed here to mark the source of the River Thames. Now I think the statue of Old Father Thames used to be here as well.
That got moved. I believe it got vandalised, and they took it to St John's Lock. Well, this is it. Looking back,
nice setting,
not
though,
a drop of water anywhere. But
it's peaceful, rural Middle England, isn't it? That's where it begins.
Yeah, the nearest village is called Kemble, in Gloucestershire. We've got about 100 miles, over 100 miles, for our journey down to Windsor.
We're not going to walk all the way. There'll be some different modes of transport, I think, on this journey.
Yeah, with the Thames, yes. But this first part must be Shanks's pony, because there's no water.
The path is the most recent of England's national trails, finally opened in 1996 after its concept in the 1930s. It took a very long time to negotiate rights of passage across land and build new bridges to allow a complete path for 180 miles from here to the Thames Barrier.
Busy road.
Ahead snakes the dry, grassy watercourse across the fields. In the distance, the church spire of Kemble can just be seen above the trees. Still no water. Evidently the Thames is in no hurry to be born. Eventually, green and lush vegetation were filling the hollow.
Ooh.
I think this is the...
You can hear it.
What's that over there?
Yeah, it's water, all right.
The first village the Thames reaches is Ewan, a pretty place with Mill Farm on the right. Evidence that years ago the river must have flowed much more freely to support a watermill. Locals blamed the decline in water on a canal built close to these parts. It's 1.5 miles old now.
Yeah.
the Thames, and
It's nothing but a stream, isn't it?
no, it's still very young.
I just can't believe that something so small can turn out so big.
It's a very pretty, peaceful spot though. It's nice and clear.
Somebody's left these behind.
A favourite stop in Ewan is the Wild Duck Inn, close to the infant Thames, a quintessentially English hostelry with a distinctive and beautiful clock firmly fixed to the aged stone wall. We spoke to Dino Mussel, the landlord.
Originally it was a private residence until about the 1940s, and then it was converted into, first of all, a pub, and then about another 5 years after that became a hotel, country inn, and dates back to about 1563. So a lot of history.
Are all the buildings original, or have they been added on?
It's been added on many times over the last 60 years, really. The main body of the building, which is the bit just behind us, is the only real remains of the main part, and the barn, which is now the restaurant. Some people have said that the Duck was a horse-drawn mill. What is now the front, which is now the car park, was a field, and it was a horse-drawn mill, and the horses used to walk the field. But
Whether
I mean,
that's
that's
true or
whether
not,
that's true. I mean, I'm not 100% on that.
How long have you been here?
Been here for 12 years. Well, I should say it's been in the family for 12 years, and I took over about 3 years ago.
Do you get many of the walkers from the Thames Path?
We get an awful lot of walkers from Thames Path. Being so close to it, it's an ideal place to stay before ramblers start their walk, which is just about 1.5 miles away. Wild Duck itself is 11 bedrooms. We've got rosettes for the food. Food really is part of the main sort of clientele that we get. A lot of corporate guys stay in the hotel, along obviously with the Thames Path walkers, and many tourists through the Cotswolds, because Cirencester is capital of the Cotswolds, and we tend to draw in a lot of tourists to the food and to the particular ambience of the building.
In the past, there has been a dispute about the real source of the Thames, for this rather unreliable start doesn't compare with the Seven Sisters springs near Cheltenham, which seem to consistently supply more water via the River Churn, where it joins the Thames at Cricklade.
The source of the Thames for you, Dean, where does that start?
Well, I'd have to believe that it was here, but a lot of people have speculated, saying that this isn't the source. I couldn't tell you whether it is or it isn't. We'd like to believe it is, so we'll go along those lines, I think.
We asked Colin Reynolds, Education Officer for the River Thames Society, his thoughts on the subject.
I firmly am a Thames head man myself. The Thames declines to a trickle above Cricklade and comes out of the ground at Thames Head, just by the Thames Severn Canal. As far as I'm concerned, that is Thames Head. I mean, these Seven Springs upstarts are just trying to gain some of the glory, as far as I'm concerned, and just because it's slightly further away from the estuary doesn't mean to say that it's the real Thames Head. So that the Thames Head is the Thames Head, a few miles outside Cirencester, without a doubt.
This uncertainty about the Thames has also been compounded by the name of the river west of Oxford. Many maps won't commit themselves, using the alternative name Isis.
I think the confusion has arisen partly because of Julius Caesar and the Latinized version of the river's name, which was Thamesis, partly through intellectual snobbery by the dons in Oxford. As far as I'm concerned, the first written evidence of the use of the name Isis was about 1480, somewhere like that. And before that it was called the Thames. And why it should change to the Isis, I have no idea. Thames itself is a corruption of the ancient Celtic word meaning dark, as is all the rivers like Teme and Tame and Tamar. They're all the same source. Thames is a very logical name, and I can't imagine a medieval peasant knowing the name of an Egyptian goddess, to be honest, even less calling their river after it.
Growing steadily all the time, the Thames now snakes its way through some 80 lakes of the Cotswold Water Park and its pretty villages. The Thames path also twists its way through the lakes and fields of these nature reserves, heading towards the next town of Cricklade. Earlier in the year, in May, we had visited the area for a special reason. The young Thames was much fuller then, enhanced by the confluence of the River Churn and the wet winter. The vast expanse of North Meadow, now a nature reserve, is home to a very rare species of flower, the snake's head fritillary, that flowers in the spring. The unique purple-checkered flower grows in abundance alongside the white variety fritillary, other meadow flowers, and the ever-present dandelions. We met Ian Donald from English Nature.
North Meadow is famous throughout the country, I think, for its fritillaries. Supposed to have somewhere like 80% of all the fritillaries that are now left in Britain, which is quite a rare flower now, in this one meadow. The meadow is 108 acres, and it's bounded by two rivers. It's got the Thames on the south side, and if you go north side, it's got the River Churn, and it's almost like an island. It's very diverse in its wildflowers. It's got cookie flowers, meadow rue, oxeye daisies, etc., etc. But the fritillaries is what makes it famous. They're quite an attractive flower and very unusual looking. This is an ancient hay meadow which has been managed in the same way for hundreds of years, and it's basically grazed in through the winter for 6 months, and it's then allowed to grow for hay, and the hay's cut in July, and that's a very ancient management system which was used much more extensively across much of the country if you go back to pre-industrial agriculture, if you like. And it's got different allotments which are divided up with marker stones which you can see around the field. And these allotments were actually allotted to different people. If you go back about 200 years during the enclosures, they gave them the hay rights to different people, so they were kind of privately owned, if you like. And English Nature slowly bought up the hay rights through the 70s, so they had kind of more control over it, so they could look after it, basically for the wildflowers essentially. And now English Nature owns all the hay rights apart from one compartment, so it has quite a lot of management say in what happens here.
Moving on from the flower-carpeted North Meadow was tricky going underfoot. The swollen river in the spring has made the footpath extremely boggy.
Yeah. Oh, lovely. Oh, we picked up plenty of mud there.
I thought I was going to lose the boot. I didn't think it was going to come out. It was this dreadful sucking noise. And out it came. But our feet feel dry. I think we're just coming into Cricklade now. There's a church and a few more buildings, so I think we're probably coming to the bottom of the high street, according to the map.
Yeah.
The High Street, with its marvellous mix of styles and periods, contains, among other ancient buildings, the Norman Church of St Mary's, excellently restored. St Sampson's was one of the great Cotswold wool churches. Its massive Tudor tower, turreted with 4 pinnacles, dominates the meadow's skyline. There is also a charming museum.
The Thames is bigger here than what we've seen from the infant Thames, and flowing a bit faster now. It's almost like every child that's ever been born, isn't it, in a hurry to get somewhere else or to get bigger.
This is Hatchett's Ford, once a crossing, but also was a traditional place to baptise the townsfolk. In early May, everything seems to be sprouting. Even cut willow logs were sending out green shoots.
Plantation.
A young plantation in the meadow was gated by this fascinating living arch of willow. The peace of the gentle river is shattered by the A419, once a Roman road, the Ermine Way. It would have crossed the young Thames at the same point many centuries ago. Here and there, streams and smaller tributaries enter the Thames, building up strength and confidence to this energetic little river. This is the bridge at Castle Eton. The Thames passes by this pretty village almost unnoticed. But the Red Lion's beer garden stretches down to the riverbank. St. Mary's Church, its graveyard bounded by the riverbank, is beautiful. Its unusual bell tower was added during restoration in the 1860s to house a Sanctus bell. The churchyard is lovely and tranquil. It must be one of the most peaceful places to stop and reflect. For the next few miles, the Thames path veers away from the Thames. Instead, it threads its way through fields and lanes, villages and farms, until we reach Inglesham. This tiny village has a most picturesque church dedicated to St. John the Baptist. It was restored in 1888 with the help of William Morris and the Society for Protection of Ancient Buildings. Morris's summer home was at Kelmscott, not far from here. The river is visibly growing up, becoming wider and stronger. It is hard to believe it was so small at its humble beginnings. Through the trees is the roundhouse, once believed to be a lockkeeper's cottage. It was here that the Thames and Severn Canal began until its closure in 1933. The Thames from this point on is now deep enough for navigation, especially for narrow boats. The canal once formed a link with the River Severn, but was slow and laborious.
It was one of the last to be built, and it was a good idea, but the railways overtook it too quickly. What is more exciting is that there is a very strong and active Thames Severn preservation and restoration project, and they have already restored parts of it. The problem is going to be at our end, up at Lechlade, at the roundhouse, where when the canal was abandoned, the land was given to the local landowners. But that's the exciting part. I mean, it's got a wonderful tunnel. It's mentioned in the Hornblower books, the fly boats going to London. Hornblower is carried on one. And if it was restored, it would be an excellent addition to the waterways of Britain, as the Kennet Avon has been, in the same way.
Our journey along the Thames, now swollen by the waters of the River Colne, has brought us to the meadows of Lechlade. Until now, the river has led a somewhat lonely existence, but here its character has matured enough to be noticed, and people want to spend time with a variety of activities beside or on it. One of Lechlade's visitors was Lynn Harvey and her family, about to go boating for the first time.
It's a very nice river, and I don't know how far you can go though, so we're going to have to find that one out, aren't we?
Get
As
order
it-
and survey map and see how far we can go.
Yeah, we've never been boating before, so we'll give it a go and see how far we get.
I think the Thames is a good river. to
Oh
dry
yes,
out.
definitely, yeah, yeah, because it's a nice long river, isn't it? But I don't know if there's any narrow bits.
Whose boat is it?
It's my mum and dad's boat. They only purchased it recently, so you know, it's just sort of getting to know where things are on the boat, and then we might travel up. Don't know. See how it goes.
How far do you think we're going?
Don't know. I don't even know what speed limits are. To be honest, I really don't know. We'll go for a few miles, I suppose. Take a weekend. So.
From Lechlade?
No,
South
we're
Wales.
South Wales, Blackwood area. So we're just up here for the afternoon, sorting the boat out, cleaning it up, basically. The cottages and stuff are down here. I mean, you sort of come off the M4, and then you're sort of into this other world. And you know, this is Cotswold stone, I presume, that they use for the cottages. But no, it's very, very nice, and you know, it's so green, isn't it? Sort of from where we come from, and it is very, very pleasant.
This is Halfpenny, or Halfpenny Bridge, dating back to 1792. It forms a graceful arch over the river. There is a cottage built into the bridge, still lived in, that was a toll house, collecting the halfpenny toll. From the bridge, one can see how large the river has become in 23 miles. Lechlade was a prosperous Cotswold wool town, full of elegant, mellow stone buildings. The spire of St. Lawrence's Church can be seen for miles. Navigation is now possible on the Thames, and less than a mile downstream from Lechlade is the first lock, St. John's. The lock gates are still manually operated, although the weir is electric. There are 45 locks on the Thames, largely managed by the Environment Agency. We spoke to lockkeeper Bob Williams.
This particular lock was built in the 1790s. Well, it started in 1789 and opened in 1794.
Why was it called St. John's Lock?
Originally there used to be a priory where the Trout pub is in the caravan park, which is across the bridge. There used to be a Benedictine priory, which was dissolved in Henry VIII's reign, and hence the name St. John's has stuck with it. The pub used to be called St. John the Baptist, and it was shortened to St. John's. And they seemed to spend more time making ale and selling it than preaching, so it sort of fell into disrepair. I've been here 16 years, 8 years as a relief lockkeeper and 8 years as a resident.
Bob, what's it like living down here by the lock? I see you've got some miniature houses over there.
Yeah, they were built by a lockkeeper, 3 lockkeepers before me for his children, about 25, 30 years ago. And each lockkeeper since has sort of inherited them, and we've patched them up and kept them going. So yeah, a nice little feature, you know, it attracts the children. And
Do you look after the grounds here? Is it all
yeah,
yours?
so all the grounds, well, everything within the confines of the lock are the lockkeeper's responsibility. Painting the gates, the mowing of the grass, the bedding plants. It's all the responsibility of the lockkeeper. Our hours in the summer are 9 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock at night. So we work a rota system of 6 days on and 2 off, so you never have the same days off. 1 week you'll have a Monday, Tuesday, the following week Tuesday, Wednesday, go right the way through. We've also got a relief lockkeeper, which he operates on my 2 days off. He'll be here. He'll go down to Buscott Lock, which is the next lock, for 2 days, and then Grafton Lock, So he works his 6 days at 3 different locks. The locks, are, especially in the summer, are normally fully manned. There's no break in the continuity.
Do you get late night boats coming through?
Yeah, when we're off duty, the boaters can actually work the locks themselves. The locks are never closed. Because it's classed as a public highway, you can't physically stop any boat coming through. So there's no restrictions on actual boat movements, unless there's a breakdown at the lock or any untoward accident, yeah.
Have you ever had a boat hit the lock?
Yeah, many times, yeah. We used to have a lady who's no longer with us, but she bought a boat and moored it at the Trout. And the first time she came through the lock, I was actually the relief at Buscott Lock. And I saw her coming down. I had a boat in the lock, and she kept on coming and coming, and I was waving frantically for her to stop. She actually hit the gates. And when I said, you know, what on earth's happened? She said, well, I thought it was a magic eye and the gates automatically opened to let me in. And there was a big 72-foot narrowboat sat in the lock, so yeah. But she was an exception to the rule. She was actually a smashing lady, you know.
But what does a lock keeper's job entail?
We're actually employed as weir keepers and lock keepers. The primary role is the control of the level of the river above me. And obviously to do that, we adjust the weir, which is an electrically operated weir. We can raise or lower the gates to release more water or to keep the water in. The function of the lock, because below the weir it creates an artificial step, they had to build a system where they could raise the boat above the level. So what they did was build a pound locks. And if you'll notice, the rise here is 2'10", which is equivalent to what's going over the weir. So it's just, the lock in itself is just a means of helping the boats above the step created by the weir. Our prime function in life is to keep the river level as close to a given mark as possible.
Reclining impressively on the lock side, overseeing proceedings, is Father Thames.
The original statue was made for the Crystal Palace exhibition in 1854. A lot of people believe it's the original, but in actual fact it's a copy that was made in the 1960s. It used to mark the source from 54 till 74, but they said because it was vandalised. Personally, I think it's so remote by the source. I think it was people taking little pieces off as souvenirs. It was repaired and brought down to St John's in 74, where it's been ever since. The original statue was actually of Neptune, and he had a trident over his shoulder. Father Thames, unfortunately at the moment it's been repaired, has a spade over his shoulder, which represents the navigators who dug the locks and the lock cuts, hence the word navvy, meaning somebody who labours hard. The figure itself obviously represents the river, and the packaging and baggage you can see behind represents the commerce that used to be on the river.
Have you seen a decline in river traffic in the years that you've been here?
Since the 1980s, there's been a gradual decline in the river traffic, but the Environment Agency have now got a new programme called Thames Ahead, which in conjunction with local authorities and businesses, we're trying to rejuvenate the river, not only for boat users, for all people who want to use the river. So they're trying to bring the river back into more use.
What's it like being a lock keeper?
Personally, it's great. I enjoy it. It's more a way of life than a job. You know, you work funny hours all year round. In the winter you work shorter hours, obviously, because of the daylight. You meet a lot of people. No 2 days are the same or anything like that. So yeah, to me it's brilliant.
Not far from St John's is Buscott Lock, also built in the 1790s. It is the smallest lock on the river, but the second highest. Lock Cottage was built in the 18th century at the time of the construction of the Thames and Severn Canal. It also kept fish in the deep ponds beneath the cottage floor. This is Buscott Weir Pool, and the green was given as an area of public recreation by the National Trust, the present owners of the village. Buscott Village was bought in 1859 by Robert Tertius Campbell, a man with far-reaching ideas on agricultural expansion, funded by money acquired in the Australian gold rush. The village shop also houses a cheerful tea room. About a mile further down the riverbank, we catch a glimpse through the trees of some elegant stone chimneys. This is the jewel that is Kelmscott Manor. Originally a late 16th century farmhouse, it was designated a manor in 1863. William Morris, one of the most influential figures in the Victorian and Edwardian art world, rented this beautiful house as his summer retreat, bringing his wife, 2 daughters, and his artist friend, Dante Rossetti, out of London to this peaceful spot. Inside the house are pictures, fabrics, tapestries and embroideries which are reminiscent of Morris's life. This is Morris's wife Janie, sketched by Rossetti. Morris is best known today for his fabric designs. There are many examples throughout the house. Helen Webb tells us about one of them.
A story goes that he was sitting in the courtyard here at the back of the manor on a summer's day when the wild strawberries were ripening on the pavestones, and he was watching the little thrushes coming down to pick at them, and hence we have the strawberry thief design.
There are some wonderful original embroideries upstairs.
Well, this bedspread on William Morris's bed was embroidered by Jane Morris. It's taken from a design from the Morris and Company, but Jane added her own little touches round the edge, and I'll show you a little piece down here in the corner. It's quite faded, but it's you can still see it. She's embroidered a little Kelmscott Manor, Kelmscott Church, St George's Church in the village, and then the River Thames she has embroidered all the way along the lower end of this bedspread. That's really pretty, isn't it? Not many people see that because unfortunately we can't hold it up to show it to everybody who comes to the manor.
You can't touch them.
You can. We don't like to touch the fabrics too much.
I read Morris's poem, embroidered on the canopy. The wind's on the wold, and the night is a cold, and Thames runs chill twixt mead and hill. But kind and dear is the old house here, and my heart is warm midst winter's harm. Rest then, and rest, and think of the best.
This is Jane Morris's bedroom, and this bed here is the bed that William Morris was born in Walthamstow, and the room is decorated in Morris's willow bough design, which is probably one of his better known. I would guess most people would recognise that, and it's really quite appropriate to have the willow bough here at Kelmscott because, of course, the Thames is just lined with willows along this stretch anyway. Also in this room we have Janie's jewel casket, which was given to her and William by Rossetti when they got married. It was hand-painted by Rossetti and his wife Elizabeth Siddal. This picture is a kind of a copy of the water willow, which is a picture that Rossetti did of Jane Morris. So it's Jane in the foreground holding some willow, and the manor in the background, and the Thames in the background as well.
Jane seemed to be a fascination in Rossetti's life at Kelmscott. Tom Hassell explains why.
It was in 1871 that Morris came here. He was looking for somewhere to use as a summer retreat, but he also had a slight domestic problem, and that was that his wife, Jane, or Janie as she was called, was having an affair with his very great friend Rossetti. And the suggestion is that by acquiring Kelmscott, leasing Kelmscott, it was possible for Jane and Rossetti to carry on their affair somewhat removed from the more public gaze of London. And indeed they did have a very passionate affair here, which ended. Rossetti left, and then Morris himself then became more closely associated with the house. And what one sees is that Kelmscott was very much an inspiration for Morris. It obviously meant an enormous amount to him, and when you look at the designs for which he's very famous, you can see echoes of Kelmscott in much of his work.
Can you elaborate on Morris's love of the Thames for us?
Well, it always seems to keep appearing in his life. All his life he seems to have lived or worked somewhere near the Thames. He was brought up, as it were, at the mouth of the River Thames, and he had a house at Hammersmith and then Kelmscott, so all the way along the Thames he is connected with it. I suppose most people know about Morris and the Thames through his most famous book, News from Nowhere, a utopian dream which described England in the 21st century, in the century we are now, an England where the Houses of Parliament had crumbled and were turned into an orchard, and there's this marvellous description of the narrator, who is of course really Morris himself, rowing up the Thames and then arriving in the hay meadows in the height of summer at Kelmscott, and then coming into the house and seeing it. And what he's really doing is describing his own experiences of visiting Kelmscott, of rowing up the Thames to Kelmscott. We know he was a passionate fisherman and that he used to fish on the Thames, and there are some wonderful cartoons of him fishing on the Thames. And a number of his designs take their inspiration and their design names from either the Thames or its tributaries. So the Thames runs like a sort of thread throughout Morris's creative life and his personal life.
Tom, can anyone visit the manor?
Yes, one of the things that the Society is keen to do is to share Kelmscott. The problem that the house has is that it's a very small house. It can't take vast numbers of people, and therefore we don't have a large advertising campaign, but it is open. Visitors who come here can see the gardens which we are reconstructing in the way that Morris would have known, and within the house itself we have many artefacts deeply connected with Morris, drawings, embroideries, and we also have a splendid tea room, so we're delighted when people do find us out and visit this beautiful house.
When is it open to the public?
It's open every Wednesday throughout the summer, and also certain Saturdays. You need to check with the local press to confirm which Saturdays it's open, but every Wednesday you can be quite certain of getting here. And we have a splendid gift shop.
The gift shop reminds me of just how visually rich this beautiful house is.
Helen, what does Kelmscott mean to you?
First of all, it is the absolute ideal place to work. I get great pleasure driving over here, be it winter or summer, coming into work. I actually have my office up in the attics. It's the peace, it's the tranquility. In fact, it's those things that Morris liked when he came in 1871, I suppose. Kelmscott's not spoiled. It's a lovely, quiet atmosphere. The birds outside that are continually making noises. I mean, we have about 10,000 people come through the house during the summer, but those days when we're busy, they're just as nice as those days in the winter when it's grey and dull and very quiet. I like them both. So I hope I'm here for another few years.
After the coziness of Kelmscott, we are now entering one of the loneliest and untouched reaches of the Thames. However, there are delightful little pockets of riverside activity every few miles.
This is Radcott Bridge, the oldest bridge on the Thames.
The main navigation channel has a newer bridge, but the other branch of the Thames flows under the far older bridge, preserved by the lack of river traffic under it. Parts of this lovely old bridge date back to the 12th century, with 3 Gothic cathedral-like arches. A statue of the Virgin Mary once stood on this parapet. The meadow is a delightful spot to moor, camp or fish. As the river meanders through the meadows, we arrive at Rushy Lock. This has a very traditional weir, unlike the electric one at St John's. The paddles you see stacked here are slotted into heavy posts called rimers. The flow of water through the weir is adjusted by adding or taking out paddles, a job that takes skill and strength by the lockkeeper. We had a chat with Graham Margeson about his lock and his charming cottage and garden. Many of the locks seem to have individual features which give them a character of their own. The quietness of this reach attracts many fishermen along its banks. This bridge is curiously named Tadpole Bridge. The solitary inn is the Trout on this lonely old turnpike road. This is Duxford, where an ancient crossing fords the shallow old Thames Channel. This is the only ford left on the river.
Well, this is really nice. This is as close as we're going to get to the Thames at this point. Have we got time to paddle?
Yeah, I'm getting hot here.
You topped off and all your trousers up.
Well, what's it like?
It's a bit slippery, I'm not going to go far. It's just lovely and cool.
There we go. Well, it's slippery, isn't it?
Yeah, be careful.
Whoa! Not so good.
There's a bit of a slope there. Be careful. Look at the dragonflies. Chasing each other.
Yeah. Oh, so cold! I told you we'd have to get wet on the Thames sooner or later.
Now come back again.
The navigational part of the Thames here takes a much straighter route through the specially constructed Shifford Lock Cut. It is a lovely, green and tranquil passage. Colin Reynolds explains.
The cut was built A, to accommodate the lock, and B, to cut out a rather large meander, very shallow meander around by the village of Duxford. It's a very uninhabited part of the Thames, and it was just the Thames Conservancy responding to the needs of navigation, cutting out shallows, shortening routes, and building the last lock on the Thames, which is interesting.
The old and the new channels of the Thames converge at Shifford. Historically, a major town existed here 1,000 years ago. King Alfred had a meeting of the English Parliament at Shifford. It is difficult to imagine that now.
Well, this looks like its new bridge, which is
New bridge.
50 years younger than Radcar Bridge. And the two pubs, the Maybush must be on this side, and the Rose Revived on the other.
Well, we could do with a break, certainly.
On the other bank stands the Rose Revived. We spoke to Rob Worthington about this idyllic spot.
New Bridge is two pubs and a bridge. And basically, it's not actually on some maps because it hasn't actually got residence-like houses as such. It was one of the first bridges to be put across the Thames, I think, and it's been the main route for years.
Rob, can you tell us about the name of the pub?
The Rose Revived was originally called Rose. It was owned by a family, I believe, and they had a big flood here 100 years ago, you know. And as the story, I believe, they couldn't afford to have it restored, so basically another company bought it off the family and redid it for them. But they wanted to keep the name The Rose, but they totally did it out. And then they got The Rose Revived because they revived the rose, and that's how the name of the Rose Revived came, really.
Where's your clientele come from?
All around. We get people doing the Thames walks. We get businessmen here, obviously, because Oxford's so close. I mean, London's not too far away. So we get families, businessmen, elderly people, because it's so idyllic, it's restful, it's quiet, except for the bit of the main road there. But once that's finished, once the tea time rush is finished, it's really quiet. And just to sit out here, you know, on the summer nights, it's just come and read, people. You know, they come with a good book, sit out, and that's basically it, really. Yeah. The good thing about it is, for me personally, because I live here as well, is just waking up in the morning and come sit down, you know, have your breakfast without knowing, just by the water. There's something about pub beer gardens on the water, isn't there? There's something, it's just so inviting, it's just so peaceful. It really is. You can't really beat it.
It's evening now and the river is quiet.
Look at these willow logs, they're all sprouting again, almost forming a barrier. And I think this is the ferryman inn day.
Yeah.
Bablock High, ancient Roman crossing here.
The Romans forded here, and there has been a ferry crossing for at least 1,000 years, although it fell into decline after the Second World War. In recent years, the ferry has been restored by the publican of the Ferryman Inn. Unfortunately, today it was temporarily out of service.
But I think this will be the end of our journey for this week. Another pub.
Yes, I know. If you had a lot to drink at each time, it would be just one big pub crawl, this Thames film, wouldn't it?
The area around Ensham Lock is known for recreation. Swinford Bridge's mellow stone arches echo back to 1770. It was built for the Earl of Abingdon. This is one of only 2 remaining privately owned toll bridges on the Thames. But it only costs 5p for a car to cross this lovely old bridge. We are only a few miles now from Oxford, where the Thames, like its scholars, will mature. Behind pretty Ensham Lock is the backdrop of Whiteham Great Wood. The graceful arch of the A34 spans the Thames, but the traffic noise is intrusive. We are at Godstow now, a popular haunt for Oxford folk over the centuries.
That's Godstow Bridge coming out.
Nunnery just beyond.
Yeah. They said it's going to cloud over later, so we've got to enjoy the morning sun.
I know. Let's hope it stays as bright as long as possible.
It was somewhere along these banks that Lewis Carroll, a don at Christ Church College, rode here with Alice Liddell and friends and first told the Wonderland stories. The Old Trout Inn is one of Oxford's busiest riverside pubs. These peaceful riverside ruins are all that is left of Godstow Nunnery. As legend has it, on a visit, Henry II's roving eye spotted Rosamond Clifford here. The tale goes on to tell that Henry was so enamoured with fair Rosamond that he built a bower for her at his nearby palace at Woodstock. Unhappily, Queen Eleanor learned of fair Rosamond's bower and paid a visit, offering her the choice between a poisoned chalice or dagger. Rosamond chose the chalice and was buried here in 1176. The dreaming spires of Oxford grace the skyline as we are less than 3 miles away now. This is Binsey. Difficult to imagine such a restful spot so close to the city. The clouds have arrived as the forecast predicted, as we paused to look over Port Meadow, almost unchanged since William the Conqueror presented this land to Oxford for free common grazing. They're not new chicks though. A couple of months I was very confident on the water now. We've reached the Victorian suburbs now. It's interesting that the houses are built with their backs to the River Thames. The river must have been more of a working waterway then. These allotments are still thriving, once a mainstay of many a family's food supply. Osney Bridge is very much a division in the boating world. It is the lowest on the Thames, only 7'6" above the waterline. Many boats cannot cross this point to explore the upper Thames. Osney Lock is also home of the Environment Agency's district office, and around it are the first signs that the Thames is still a working river. We're now so close to the centre of Oxford that we could not possibly pass up the opportunity to visit one of England's architecturally rich and historic cities. We've reached Folly Bridge, where the Thames finally comes of age. This is the traditional home of Salter Brothers, known for over a century as boat builders still to this day, and for their steamer trips along a large part of the Thames. For the next 9 miles, we are going to travel on their 1912 vessel Goring down to Abingdon. This rare piece of film belonging to Salter Brothers shows how little Folly Bridge and the traditional steamer trips have changed in over 50 years. The only real change being their conversion from steam to diesel in the late 1950s. The crew for today's trip are Neil Kinch and skipper Graham Andrews.
We're away. It's nearly as wide as the river, isn't it?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of your captain and crew, I'd like to welcome you on board Salter's passenger vessel Goring, and wish you a very enjoyable cruise with Salters.
Looks like they've had 8 this week, judging by the evidence of the streamers and the rubbish.
Hello, hang on. We're just going to crash if we go off like this. Start you again. Good try. No, I can remember you lot.
Thought that.
That's it, you're all with them, so that's sorted. Yeah, okay. Tea, coffee, soft drinks, alcoholic drinks, and snacky food. Thank you.
What do you say, Bucky Friends?
That's great, thank you very much.
Regulars that come on.
Oh, we get a few regulars, yes. Some tourists, some people who just live in Oxford, and if they have friends down for the weekend or whatever, they'll take them on the boat. So it varies all sorts. And they got sort of coach parties booked on with foreign people and sort of school parties, pensioners clubs, sort of anything really.
How long have you been working?
I've been here sort of 6 years now. So,
You full time?
yes, and I work all year round, but we're sort of obviously very seasonal. We've taken on a lot of students to work over the summer season because it suits them and suits us.
What do you do in the winter?
My main job, I'm in the office most of the time, so I just get up onto boats at weekends and evenings. But most of the seasonal staff, obviously, they work on boats in the summer and in the winter, they go back to their studies. And we have a small team that work all year round doing maintenance work on the boats, maintaining them over the winter, yes.
You don't take the boats out?
We've got 1 or 2 which we use for Christmas parties. We do a lot of sort of entertainment work, parties for students, that sort of thing, with discos, jazz bands, catering. That happens all year round. From December Christmas parties, but boats like this one we only use in the summer because it's too open for the winter. We've got more modern enclosed ones which we use in the winter season. But in the summer we operate all along the Thames from Oxford, Reading, Abingdon, Windsor, Maidenhead, Marlow, all along.
This is Iffley Lock, the first of 3 on our steamer trip.
How difficult is it to handle a craft like this?
Well, it's like everything really, but once you've had the training, and it's all down to experience. On a nice summer's day, you know, a little bit of training and anyone can do it, but you get a bit of stream running or strong wind and it's totally different. You know, you need to keep your wits about you a bit then.
Do you have to know these different stretches of the river, the depths?
Well, yeah, you get to know. Having covered them over the years, you get to know where the shallow parts are. If it gets narrow, you have to just watch the wash from the steamer. Being so big, they tend to cause a bit of havoc with the smaller craft if you're not careful.
How do you find the other users of the river? Are they pretty competent, or do you have to?
Yeah, mostly are. You get a few hire craft out on Saturdays and Sundays, and they can be a bit daunting sometimes. You have to watch where they're going as well as where you're going yourself.
Yeah.
But, I think on a nice day, nice sunny, there's nowhere better.
We're now passing Rose Island. This house used to be an old pub years ago and is home to Colin Reynolds, Education Officer for the Thames Society. A few days before our river trip, I asked him about his unusual island home.
How did you come to live here at Rose Island?
It was been in my wife's family since 1953, and on the death of my mother-in-law, we moved here permanently in '96, because I've always wanted to live here and serve my children, and the opportunity arose. My mother-in-law did some work in the Oxford Record Office. She'd seen a written record of the name of the innkeeper in 1590, although beyond that, or earlier than that, the island was part of the estate of the Knights Templars, who owned land down towards Sanford, and they were abolished in 1300. Now, if it was enough to be mentioned as part of the estate, it just wasn't a piece of uninhabited land, I wouldn't imagine. So there's more research to be done there, I think. And Rose Island has got nothing to do with roses. It's to do with red osiers, which are a form of willow which were used for basket making and various other rural crafts, which were harvested round here, I understand. The back of the house has been rebuilt. When my mother-in-law bought it, it was stuccoed all round, and soon after she bought it, the stucco at the rear of the house fell down to reveal medieval half-timbering. Most of the half-timbering was dust, and so they had it rebuilt in brickwork to match the Victorian brickwork. But they had some of the half-timbering that survived dated, and it is certainly 1400 to 1500 to dates of the timbering, which makes the house probably easily that old. This bit on the left is a Victorian balcony that was walled in about 1900, creating two more rooms, because the place was a pub. It was called the Swan, a morals pub. Obviously they wanted more and more space for entertaining the undergraduates who punted down here in the summer. In the winter it was dead. In fact, there's a lovely story. The last publican was offered it by Morals for £600, but he turned it down because he wouldn't make enough money in the winter. His daughter recounts the stories of, in the winter, of her father having to strap two kitchen chairs to his feet to wade up through the floods to the village to get milk and bread, which is one of the reasons they didn't want to buy it, I think. Autumn is my favourite time, when you get, there's a wonderful sensation several times a year when the river is warm and the air is cold, and you get a sort of chest-high, thick mist on the water meadow over there. And it's wonderful to see it forming, and it's like a cloud lying on the... And I can sit out here, however cold it is, and just enjoy it.
Can you tell us about the River Thames Society?
It was formed just over 40 years ago as the voice of the Thames, because at the time there was nobody looking out for the river. Well, there was the river, because the Thames Conservancy was looking after the actual navigation, but the areas around the river, and with 17 or 18 different local authorities, all having their own idea on what should happen to the river, we felt a unified voice was useful. And a lot of people loved the river, and they wanted to have some sort of club, association, society where they could join together and enjoy it themselves and do good at the same time. The society feels that one of the ways of preserving the Thames is to present it to young people, and so Education Officer was a fairly quickly formed part of the society, and I took it over 2-3 years ago, and my job really is to publicise and provide resources for young people, go and speak to them in schools, take them on led riverside walks, provide resources if they email me or write to me. And it's very interesting because they have a different perspective of the Thames, and it's nice to see the enthusiasm come through. I was born in Reading, and my father and I had a skiff, 3 men in the boat type camping skiff, almost since I can remember, and I've been on the Thames. I think it's just got into my blood. I've been to other rivers, I've been on continental waterways, and they're all beautiful and they're lovely, but somehow the Thames just gets me, you know, and I just can't imagine living anywhere too far away from it. You know.
Do you have any entertaining stories about the Thames?
The end of one summer, when the steamers, Salter still had a steamer, a proper steam-driven steamer, it and the Maple Durham, which was their big diesel-driven boat, came through our lock on the way back up here to Oxford for the winter. and they decided to have a race between Whitchurch and Goring, which was a nice long reach, and they wanted extra hands to stoke and generally tend the steamer. So I had a ride on this race between Whitchurch and Goring, which was incredibly exciting because they were going flat out. The steamer won by about a length, but I think Salter's got a certain amount of stick from the boat owners whose boats were washed on the bank by the waves created by these two large boats doing about 10 or 15 knots up the river. But it was good fun.
Get all white research as well.
Yes. Not geese, swan. That one is a swan. That's it, swan.
Back on board the steamer, we are approaching Sandford Lock. The weir is called the Sandford Lasher.
Bouncy castle. Bouncy castle.
A nice boat coming through here.
How deep is this one?
We're going to go down 8 foot 10. It's the deepest lock on the Thames.
Has that not got a name?
No, it doesn't. No.
Slips well though.
Yeah, it just slips as the boat goes down, it slips.
It goes down really quickly.
Yeah.
And you think how much water it's shifting.
Everything's echoing now as well.
We're there now.
Cheers, Derek, thank you.
Riding on the steamer today is Graham's father, Leonard, who was also a skipper with Salter Brothers on the Thames at one time.
Graham, can you tell us some of the history of the Salter Brothers?
Yes, they started in the 1880s running a weekly return service between Oxford and Kingston, and slowly increased their fleet until they were able to cover most parts of the river on a daily basis. When I first started, they had about 17 steamers this size, as well as a couple of smaller launches.
How long have you been working on the river?
About 40 years, I suppose, now, on a part-time basis. Yeah, my father worked for them before, and as soon as I could swim, he used to let me go with him, and so I've been on the steamers ever since.
My son used to come on the steamers with me, so he brought right up with it from start. And he's only a youngster, about 3 or 4.
Yeah.
And we went into a lock one day, and he's trying to do the ropes like we do, and he fell in between the steamer and the lock, and the mate on board pulled him up by his hair. Now, so he'd been really in trouble because he got squashed up against side. You couldn't hold the boat away. When the fellow on there with me, he lent him a pair of overalls. We stripped him of his clothes, put him in the boiler house, and they was dried, and he went home and his mother didn't know anything about it. When she found out, she didn't like it then, but she said I wouldn't sleep if I knew what you do get.
I was going to say, oh dear.
Sort of taught me to skipper them, and as soon as I was old enough, I sort of began working on the crew first and collecting tickets and things like that, and then skippering later on.
On the hill is the manor house of Newnham Courtenay, which now has a classic view of the river. However, this was achieved by the first Earl of Harcourt, who decided that the medieval village on the riverbank spoilt his view. So he demolished it, moving the villagers to new dwellings along the road. On the right is Radley College Boathouse, now elegantly refurbished as a private residence.
Mr. Andrews, when did you start with Salter Brothers?
The Tuesday after Easter it was, 1930. I started there as an apprentice boat builder, and then I worked out on the river a lot, because my father had done 40 years at Salters before then. So we was brought up with the river really. Went on doing the marine engineering work on the motorboats and the cruisers. I come onto the steamers and worked up to a skipper. That's when we had steamboats and the funnels had to be pulled in out to go under the bridges then. Otherwise they got knocked down. And we used to have about 13 boats at a time going out of Windsor with school children. Used to come from all over the country. And they used to have a trip from Windsor to Runnymede, because that's Magna Carta. We used to do a trip down there, drop them off at Runnymede, pick another load up on a coach load to come back to Windsor. Well, we've had some good times, I must say.
What about the war years with Salter Brothers?
Well, in the war, when the war started on the Sunday, and the 3rd of the month, September, I was in London, sent to London the next day onto the Maple Dome, because we had 3 boats down at London, Port of London Authority. We come under the Port of London Authority. It was hospital ships. Because the thing is, if the roads were blocked through bombing, they only had the river to transport passengers. We fitted out as hospital ships. And we run through the war, I'd come away then, they fetched me away when they had all this work building these landing crafts and coastal boats.
For the Normandy landings?
Yeah. Then I was fetched back to do the boat building again, so I had to come off it. That's how it went on.
So has all of your family been associated with Salters?
Yeah, I had 4 brothers, and everyone started at Salters.
And what does the Thames mean for you?
Oh, it's in the blood, isn't it? Yeah, it's properly in the blood when you get that. I mean, it's like my son. The rivers is life. He only does it temporary, but it is his life. His hobby. He calls this his hobby.
And how about the Thames? Does that mean a great deal to you, the actual river itself?
Yeah, yeah, it's the only river for me, really. You know, I just like it. It's something different happens all the time. You know, people say, how can you keep going up and down the same stretch day in and day out? Don't you get bored? But I don't get bored. I find it's good. I enjoy it.
Riding on a Salters steamer today reminds us there is a continuity and tradition engendered by the Thames. There is still a fondness and fascination for the river. We have left one historic place and are about to discover another. Abingdon. Abingdon is a place of great antiquity, having been occupied since the Bronze and Iron Ages. It prospered as an important wool town. The monks from the powerful Benedictine monastery diverted the Thames from its original course to a route which supplied their mill in 1060. Andersea Island was created as a result of this diversion and is now a leisure area. The gatehouse at the junction of Bridge Street and High Street leads to the Abbey ruins. This spectacular building is County Hall, designed by Christopher Kempster and built in the late 17th century. We are in Ox Street to witness an old tradition take place, the election of the mock mayor. The Ox Street horns, which accompany the Morris men, are reputedly the horns of an ox roasted in the town in 1700, which were won in combat between the Ox Street men and the Vineyard men from the opposite end of the town. Throughout election day, the Morris men tour the town. We spoke to Stuart Jackson, who is a descendant of the Hemmings family, long established in Ox Street.
Now, Stuart, you're the reigning mayor. What are your chances, do you think, for being re-elected?
That's a million-dollar question, that is, isn't it? It's up to the residents. You see, yesterday evening we posted all the ballot papers through the letterboxes of all the residents and businesses that are in Ox Street, and it's up to them to vote today whether I'm re-elected or not. So, I mean, I'm edging the bets, really. Abingdon is unique in as much that we have two mayors in the town. Obviously, it's the town mayor who's elected by the council, and the other mayor is the mock mayor, which is what I perform as the Ox Street mayor. But in actual duties that I have to perform, as I say, possibly fates and that sort of thing, but nothing really taxes the brain too much. Basically, what's happening today is that we're here to celebrate the horns and the battle that took place in 1700. And that we've obviously got other sides with us today. We had the Britannia Coconut Dancers here with us today from Lancashire, and a local side, Long Crendon, here to make the celebrations go well.
The coconut dances are unique. They tap out rhythms on wooden discs or nuts, fastened to their palms, knees and waists. The dress is supposedly of pirate origin, brought to Cornwall by Moorish pirates. Cornish miners migrated north and brought the traditional dance with them.
It does tend to be sort of the same sort of people doing it. It's very difficult to get young people, unfortunately, to come along and do this. We can get them up to around about their 13 or 14, and they then find out about girls, and we tend to lose them then, and it's very difficult to get them back.
The Abingdon traditional Morris dancers are proud to present Buttercup Joe.
Written down, or is it passed on?
No, it's the steps and the music basically are not written down, and it's basically a living tradition. But the music and the steps are the same. I learnt these steps back in the 1950s when my grandfather was the mayor. He taught me, and we have a practice once a fortnight throughout the winter where we practice the steps for newcomers that come along. So it's something that we just pass on.
While the Morris men have lunch in the Broadface pub beside the Thames, the mayor's chair is being decorated in Ox Street at the polling station. On the way to the almshouses, their path led through St Helen's churchyard, where a wedding party awaited the arrival of the bride. The Long Crendon Morris men entertain the almshouses residents.
For tonight will merry, merry be. For tonight will merry, merry be. For tonight will merry, merry be. To all will
It's 4 o'clock, and Stuart places his vote in the ballot box. All the Morris men have now returned to Ox Street.
So how do you feel?
No, it's on camera.
The votes will be counted in the brewery tap, on the site of the old brewery.
Easier in the other door, isn't it? Or not?
Mayor David Allinson supervises the count.
There's a pen in the bottom here.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I duly announce that Stuart Jackson is re-elected as Mayor of Ox Street.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank the residents of Ox Street. Although you said it was a low turnout today, I suppose that's a national trend, as you already said. I think it's important that with Morris dancing today, we try and keep this tradition going. I think it's important for the heritage of this country that we keep Morris dancing going. It's our heritage, we should keep it alive. Don't keep complaining, Rodney.
Have you ever picked yourself up, lad?
Yeah.
Oh, you don't know what I mean then. You sure you haven't got lead on your lap as well, Stuart?
The re-elected mayor is carried to Trinity Church Hall for tea.
So you're mayor for another year?
I'm mayor for another year, yes, with all the other duties that goes with it.
Well done.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you.
Back on the peaceful riverbank, Dave has brought something along to show me.
Yeah, I brought you some pictures to show. It's my dad and my Uncle Nelson. It's probably over 50 years ago. They went on a river journey from along the Thames.
This is Abingdon, this one.
That's right, they came through here. There's a picture of my dad on the riverbank, a bottle of beer. So they're doing the same sort of journey as we're doing now.
They had a
There's
canoe.
Uncle Nelson. He called it a fold boat. It was a collapsing canoe. It had, yeah. See, it had a skin and it stretched over these wooden former things. It was bizarre.
Which folded
But that
up?
was quite common in those days to go on the Thames. And
So they folded up a boat and took it
yeah,
on a train?
They took it on a train to Oxford and they sailed all the way down to Reading.
Good Lord.
That was a picture of Caversham Bridge, I think. Anyway, I'm sure they're inspired by Three Men in a Boat, the book, and they wanted to go out and mess about on the river.
Well, these are great.
Yeah, I thought I'd surprise you with them.
We have arrived at Clifton Hampden. Its lovely red brick bridge replaced the ferry in 1864. The Barley Mow is one of the most famous pubs on the Thames. I used to frequent here in my late teens. This is Day's Lock. It is the main gauging station for the flow of the Upper Thames. The islands here form a nature reserve. In March, an annual Poo Sticks Championship takes place here. These visitors are trying their skill.
1, 2, 3, drop. I definitely noticed there was definitely an early drop there. Where is it? Where is it?
No, I'm getting
That level, come on. The white curvy one, definite.
Above the lock are the Cinedon Hills, better known as Whittenham Clumps. This is Round Hill, which affords spectacular all-round views. This is Castle Hill, once an Iron Age hill fort. All of the villages along the banks of the River Thames have seen much strife since the departure of the Romans. The bottom of the hill at Little Whittenham, a particularly large find of Saxon remains was discovered. Below is the magnificent Dorchester Abbey and ancient Iron Age ramparts in the foreground. Dorchester Bridge crosses the River Thames, looking very much like the young River Thames did back at Cricklade, 60 miles upstream. The original cathedral here was Saxon, begun by Marinus, a Christian missionary. The Normans built the abbey, but at the suppression of the monasteries, it was purchased by Richard Beaulieu and given for use as the parish church, thus ensuring its preservation through the centuries. Some years ago, an American visitor, Miss Stedman, and her American friends of Dorchester Abbey restored the abbey church so it can be enjoyed today. Currently, there is a professional dig in progress at the abbey. The village is rich in Roman remains. A large number of ancient coins have been found here. Back on the Thames at Shillingford Bridge, there is a leisure area and pool. This is Benson, where I lived in my late teens. Wallingford was founded by the Romans at a point where they could ford the Thames. William the Conqueror fortified the town with a castle and was responsible for the first bridge here. The present one was rebuilt and fortified in 1809. The town has a variety of elegant buildings. We follow the Thames path through the town, very close to the river. At the bottom of Thames Street stands the oldest church in Wallingford, St Leonard's. Parts of this church date back to Saxon times. The distinctive tower can be seen from across the Thames. The churchyard is managed as a wildlife conservation area and has a circular trail for visitors running through it. We met chairman of the group, Tony Barr-Taylor. Tony, can you tell us about St Leonard's Conservation Group and how it began?
Well, in 1991, a group of us were rather worried about the cuckoo flowers on the north side of the church, which were cut long before they'd set seed. Every year they were cut, and so they had no real chance to proliferate. And as a result of getting together with the PCC, we decided that it would be a good idea for us to form the conservation group, which actually was established in 1994.
What's happening on the north side of the church?
Well, that is where the cuckoo flowers grow, in particular in abundance. Now, the management plan suggested that this should not be cut until July, which is the process that we follow. But we actually cut it now with a scythe, and we let the hay lie there so that the seeds can disperse into the ground. And then about a week after it's been cut, we try and clear all the hay away. Then we get the mowers in to take it down to the more normal level. And at the moment we are removing that hay. In other words, we're haymaking.
I believe the churchyard has won an award.
We've won 2 awards, yes, for our work for the conservation. And we are actually entered for a national competition, and we shall hear about that in the autumn, I guess. So, yes, we've been recognised.
What plants can the visitors see throughout the year here?
Well, we've got a marvellous display in the spring, including a bank of cowslips, which I have to admit were planted because we had lost all the cowslips, and we had a wonderful visit from David Bellamy, who wanted to see a local conservation project in Wallingford. As a mark of his actual visit, he planted, I think there were 8 or 9 plants, and we now have about 25 which have grown from the seed that they have actually sowed. And then as the year progresses, we get a succession of other lovely flowers. At the moment, the most positive sighting, I think, would be of marjoram, which actually is in the same bank as the cowslips have. But there are so many. There were actually 108 different species recognised by a survey in 1990 in this churchyard. That includes trees and things. And then on top of that, we've got lichens and mosses and tremendous lot of different plants. And not only plants, we've got animals. We've trapped mammals and recognised them, had them identified, released them again, and they've been trapped again the next day. All sorts of little projects like that, which have been very, very popular with bats and goodness knows what. But we haven't finished. We've got a lot more yet to do.
We are now approaching the twin towns of Streatley and Goring, with their elegant hotels. For the next part of our journey, we have arrived at Goring to meet Ian and Dot Hart, who are experienced boaters.
Well, this looks like the Heart's Content. I think this is it, Dave. Lovely day.
Yeah.
We first made contact with Ian and Dot through the internet. They have produced a marvellous website about the Thames.
Hello there, Dot and Ian.
Oh, hello. Nice to see you.
Clover and David.
Hello.
Hello.
Nice to see you.
We've got a camera there, so we can't.
Good. You're going to come
Nice
on
to see you.
board?
Nice to
Thank you. Oops. Yes,
Thank
you.
Behind the Heart's Content was a single parent with a large family looking to be fed. Ian and Dot were going to take us downriver for 13 miles.
Okay, can you keep on for a moment? We're now coming through the Goring Gap, and this is where the River Thames is cut through from the Berkshire Downs on the right-hand side here, and on the left-hand side we have the Chilterns. And they reckon it was caused due to the last ice age, which started about 20 million years ago, and with the help of all the ice and the flow of water, it cut this channel right the way through. We think it's one of the best stretches on the River Thames. It's beautiful.
The Heart's Content was making steady progress downriver. I asked Ian how fast you can travel on the Thames.
The actual statutory speed limit is in kilometres per hour, which nobody really understands in this country, of course. So it's 8 kilometres per hour, which is 5 miles an hour. And that speed limit is over the ground. But most boats measure speed through the water, and they measure that speed in knots. So for a boater it's quite complicated.
We are approaching one of several elegant red brick railway bridges along the Thames. These master works were built by Brunel and carry the Great Western Line from London.
When were you first interested in boating?
Well, we started boating about 14 years ago, and it was rather on almost a mad impulse, because at the time Ian was working in London and racing up and down the M4 every day, and the weekends just seemed to disappear because he was so tired. So we decided we needed an interest. So living in Reading, and for years with the children we used to walk down to Mapledome Lock and watch the boats go through. So we said, well, how about a boat? So what we did, not knowing anything about boats at all, we just went from one boat yard to another, learning a little more each time, until we found a boat which was a Seamaster 23, and we bought that, and that was the beginning of this interest.
So we hadn't a clue how much a boat cost or anything when we first started, and we couldn't understand why some boats seemed a lot cheaper than others. Then we realised the cheaper ones perhaps didn't have an engine because they needed an outboard motor which you had to buy separately. That's how naive we were.
So how many boats have you had?
This is the fourth boat in 14 years. We've had this 4 years, and this is our last boat now. This is the boat we're just going to keep now we're retired.
Really, for about 10 years, all we ever did was go up and down the Thames. And although people say, well, don't you get fed up with the same stretch? You don't actually, because it changes from season to season. You see the beauty of it from springtime even into wintertime. We've had a lovely day cruising on Boxing Day, which is absolutely marvellous. It's only since we've had this boat that we've gone onto the tidal stretch of the river, which was quite an adventure.
And then gone to sea.
And then gone to sea from there.
What does the Thames mean to you, both?
Basically, it means escaping from the rush of our normal life, as our life was then. Obviously, as we're retired, it's slowed down naturally. But yes, it was just great getting away from the car, away from traffic. But we could be as sociable or as unsociable as we like. We can meet up with friends who have boats and go out with them, or we can be on our own. It's just great. Just love it.
And the whole pace of life just slows down. That's what it is, really. And of course, it's a very historic river, but at the end of the day, it's all about enjoying it.
On the left is Hart's Lock Wood, named after Hart's Lock, no relation to Dot and Ian. You can still see the remains of the old lock on the riverbank.
We call it Child Beale, but it's called Beale Park nowadays. It's a centre where they have rare breeds of animals. They have a pet area where children can handle young animals. It's basically a good place for a family day out. But they're very good for boaters because there's a long stretch where we can moor, and it's completely free, and it's very peaceful, lovely to moor here.
Standing at the helm of the Heart's Content gave a vantage point which enabled us to see further across the banks and meadows.
These look interesting, Dot.
Yes, well, we're coming into Pangbourne now. This road is Shooter's Hill. There are 7 houses built at the end of the 19th century, and their nickname is the 7 Deadly Sins. The story is that they were built for the mistresses of an unnamed royal personage, but I don't think it's true.
We're just coming up now to the lay-by before Whitchurch Lock.
They're called lay-bys, aren't they?
Yes. That's the part you moor up before you actually, while you're waiting to go into the lock, is called a lay-by. Yes. We're actually going straight in because there's already a boat going in there now, and we'll just follow that boat in. This is one of the very few locks on the River Thames where the public can't get access. So it's a very good lock when you're starting boating and you make all your messes on a lock. It's a very good one to start because the public aren't there to see you.
On the south bank of the Thames lies Pangbourne and the lovely riverside pub The Swan. Children's author Kenneth Graham moved to his second Thameside home here after the success of his river story, The Wind in the Willows. Pangbourne Meadow is owned by the National Trust. On the north bank is Whitchurch, reached by the white-painted iron toll bridge, built in 1902, the third bridge to be built here. This and the one at Swinford are the only remaining toll bridges across the Thames. Back on board the Heart's Content, we were making steady progress downstream towards the next lock. Dot has taken the helm.
Dot, did you have to take classes to learn to skipper the boat?
Not for skipping the boat, no, just learn through practice really. Yes. It's not that difficult, but you've got to try and forget driving a car. The technique is totally different from driving a car. So basically it moves very slowly, so as long as you do everything slowly and don't make any sudden manoeuvres, it's quite safe. You're in good hands.
What about navigation?
On the Thames itself, that's easy. You either go upstream or downstream. But for our trips on the tidal part and beyond, we've been on several courses. But despite all our other journeys, last year we were in France, coming back to the Thames, it makes you appreciate how wonderful a river it is.
There's nothing better than these meadows, is it?
No, they're lovely, aren't they? And you do get a lot of Canada geese, which are becoming rather a nuisance because they reproduce quite vigorously.
Do they?
Yes. I've been told that they were actually just brought over to decorate a lake in a stately home. This was centuries ago.
Yes,
Since then they've just naturalised.
On the left, we get a brief glimpse of Tudor mansion Hardwick House.
Elizabeth I did sleep there, so they say. And King Charles I is supposed to have played bowls.
The scenery is rolling countryside. It's just so relaxing, it's unbelievable. We're just coming up to Maple Durham Lock. It's on the right hand side. On the left hand side we've got Maple Durham House. All the locks on the River Thames, all the weirs on the River Thames up as far as Maple Durham have salmon leaps in them. They've been trying to encourage the salmon to come back, and this was one of the first locks to have a salmon leap put in the 1960s. And they've all now got them up to here, and the actual salmon is coming back to the Thames. Yes.
Oh yes, this is quite a big lock.
Somebody's got, we're sharing it at the moment with, he's trying to get the swans out.
Yeah, you're correct.
Most of the locks on our journey have a good floral display. I asked Ian about them.
They used to have a competition each year for the best locks. Unfortunately, when Thames Water took over, being a private enterprise, they all stopped all that. It's a pity, but most of the lock keepers who were around at that time still keep their locks in this lovely condition.
This is beautiful.
Thank you.
Before you publish that, you'll have to speak to my editor. And my agent.
When we first started boating, we used to get very tense when we were coming to this lock because it's our local lock, so we thought, oh, there's bound to be somebody there watching who we know. If we ever made a mistake, it was always
Through the trees is the river entrance to Mapledurham House. In the grounds there is St Margaret's Church and a working mill. The Elizabethan mansion itself belonged to the Blount family for many years and is now open to the public on several weekdays during the season. Several film and television productions have been made in these delightful grounds, including Inspector Morse and The Eagle Has Landed. On the right is Purley with its assortment of riverside homes. We are entering the outskirts of Reading. On its path through towns and villages, the Thames gets all sorts of litter thrown into it. Dot recalls one of the times when their propeller was fouled.
We had something wrapped around the prop, we could see it. Anyway, when we pulled this article away from the prop, it turned out to be a pair of purple ladies' knickers.
Do you often get things caught round the propeller?
Yes. Just occasionally. Things like plastic bags are a nightmare because as the propeller turns, it just attracts anything that's nearby. Yes. And many years ago, I love telling this story. We just come out of Sonning Lock. Just in the corner of my eye, I caught the sight of this man running down the side on the towpath. Anyway, I looked again, and he was stark naked. And then I called to Ian to have a look, and he disappeared into the bushes. And about 10 minutes later, we were cruising along the river, and at that time, Thames Police had a river launch, and it was coming up towards us, so we signalled to him to slow down, and we regaled the story of this streaker. Anyway, they did go and have a look, and we saw them later in the day, but they hadn't found him.
So the policeman did actually ask whether you could give a description of him.
He had very white legs.
So it was just your luck. Ian, how's the river traffic changed over the years?
Yes, it has. I think probably the late 70s and the early 80s were its heyday, and with hire boats, private boats. But since then, slowly over the years, it's declined, and it's the lowest now that it's ever been. A lot of it is the holiday boat companies closing down. The only increase we have seen on the river is been in narrowboats. I think now there's arrangements between British Waterways and the Environment Agency on reciprocal licensing arrangements. So a lot of people actually come down the Thames as part of their trip when they're doing the Oxford Ring or something like that, and that's been an increase. You'll see a lot of boaters who get rather upset about it because they take so much room up in moorings. But I take the view that everybody's got the right to be on the river, and in fact the more boats we have on the river, the cheaper it is and the better it is for all of us. But it's a shame if we can't attract people back to the river, it'll be a real shame.
Oh dear, so
The river meadow at Reading has hundreds of swans along its banks, the most we've ever seen on our journey in one place. This unusual black swan has probably escaped from Beale Park upriver. This is Caversham Bridge. Reading is a large town with many contrasts, old and new. The Oracle shopping complex has been built on the River Kennet one of the tributaries of the Thames, also carrying canal traffic. The vast Reading Abbey was founded by Henry I in 1121. It housed 200 monks, a huge number in those days. Currently, the abbey ruins are host to open-air performances in the summer. Oscar Wilde also spent some time here. We had to wait a while for the boats to come out of Caversham Lock. Dot showed me below deck on a quick tour.
This is the saloon, and we have a table here that we use as a coffee table, but it also lifts up to a dining table as well, which is rather clever. Behind here we have our storage for drinks.
Ah, right, drinks cabinet there, right.
Here we have the galley with most things that we need. We have a grill and a small oven and a small fridge,
yes.
and then plenty of storage space for food, crockery, pans. This is the fore cabin, which has 2 single berths.
Oh, good.
And this window is also an escape hatch. Each area of a boat has to have a means of escape. So this is the aft cabin where Ian and I sleep.
Oh, lots of room.
So good size double bed. Here we have the ensuite shower room, which this is an electric powered toilet. So just have to press a little button when we need to flush it, and then there's a good shower as well.
You've got all mod cons.
It is, yes.
Wonderful.
There's a map of the Thames that Dot has done in County Cross-Stitch. You can see where we've been, actually. There's Lechlade and the Kelmscott Manor, Ensham, the lovely Don on a bicycle at Oxford, Abingdon, Chillingford, Wallingford, Goring. Oh, it's beautiful. The lock is now ready for us to enter. Caversham Lock is run by a female keeper, Tanya Rosenberg. Her floral display is superb. The 3 girls in the rowing boat were having a spot of bother.
I think they've managed it. It's three women in a boat.
Thank you.
So Tesco's have a riverside frontage?
Yeah, this was built about 5 years ago. It's one of their 24-hour shops, and they built these moorings purely so boaters could do their shopping there. They actually provide bath bins at the end there to put the rubbish in, and it's very, very well used. The biggest problem they have is that people tend to, if they're not careful, for overnight moorings and stay there for too long, and stopping people from mooring there.
Yes.
But no, it's an excellent idea.
There's a shop.
Ian, can you tell us a little bit about your boat?
What is a Broom Ocean of 34, built by Broom Boats in Brundle in Norfolk. She's 34 foot long. She's got a beam, that's the width of 12 foot 4, and a draft, that's the depth below water level to the keel, of 3 feet. We've got twin engines on here. although you don't need twin engines from the river, it does make manoeuvring easier, but we got the twin engines because if we do some sea work, it's nice to have the comfort of the extra engine. We have a few navigation aids. We have a GPS, which is a global positioning system. That picks up satellites in the sky and it actually tells you exactly where we are. You can see at the moment it's showing on latitude north 51 degrees 27.66. We have a compass. That tells me exactly where my rudder is, and I need to know that when I'm manoeuvring in and out of locks. And finally, I've got gives me depth and the speed. And over there, I have a radar, which again for sea work, don't need it for the river. Obviously, it's nice to have again if the fog comes down.
It is so peaceful on the river. The time has just slipped away.
Well, it looks as if we're coming up to Sonning Lock, which is the end of our journey with Dot and Ian, sadly.
Hope you enjoyed the trip with us.
It was a pleasure meeting you. Thank you
Enjoy.
for showing you the river.
Enjoy the rest of your travels down the Thames.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you. Thanks a lot. We really enjoyed it.
Back on the towpath, we decided to explore Sonning.
Busy this path. We've got cyclists and joggers and walkers.
There has been a mill at Sonning for over 9 centuries. The current 18th century flour mill has been cleverly converted to a dinner theatre. The Thames winds its way past Shiplake. This was the largest flock of Canada geese we had seen on our journey. The Thames Path threads its way past the river frontage of Shiplake College, a large modern brick building on top of the hill. Not far away is the charming little Shiplake Church.
This is Marsh Lock. We've got to reach it by a wooden causeway because it's in the middle of the river.
You can feel the bridge shaking, Dev.
I know, I'm not looking down. I don't like to see the river through the hole. Look at that thatched boathouse there.
It's lovely, isn't it? It's a beautiful area. This is.
Well, we're on to Henley now. It's just here, across the other side of the bridge.
The elegant craft on the river reminds us that it is Regatta Week at Henley. The river meadow is not only a good place for recreation, but has on the far side the River and Rowing Museum. Designed by David Chipperfield, it celebrates the traditions and environment of the River Thames and features the historic town and its rowing traditions. Today, Henley is packed with regatta visitors. Before the regatta existed, the first Oxford and Cambridge boat race was rowed over the now famous Henley Reach in 1829. Oxford wore dark blue and Cambridge sported a pink sash. Oxford won. Henley Regatta was established in 1839 and became royal in 1851 when Prince Albert became its first royal patron. The racing lanes are called Barks and Bucks respectively. Henley Regatta attracts rowing crews from all over the world and is still an amateur event. There are no money prizes and no commercial sponsorship or external subsidy. The Environment Agency launch is on patrol. To enter the steward's enclosure, gentlemen will wear lounge suits, jackets or blazers with flannels and a tie or cravat. Ladies must wear dresses or suits with a hemline below the knee. A fortnight later, another event takes place at Henley, the Thames Traditional Boat Rally, held at Fawley Meadow alongside the regatta course. Hundreds of traditional boats arrive for this weekend gathering. With a moderate admission charge, it makes a popular outing for all sorts of visitors. The River Thames Society has a marquee at the boat rally, and we met up once more with Colin Reynolds.
It was started by the River Thames Society itself to celebrate the traditional river craft. It became too big for the society to organise, and it was given to a separate committee, and now it's one of the, I think it's one of the biggest traditional boat rallies in Europe. It's a wonderful day out with some wonderful boats, and makes me very envious.
Colin, can any traditional boat enter here?
They have to be wood or steel. I have a fiberglass boat which is nearly 50 years old, but they won't allow it. So there are various categories of boats. Some are unpowered skiffs, canoes, punts. Some are steam-powered. There's a very strong contingency of the Dunkirk Association boats. And then there's slipper launches and other traditional day launches. So there's different classes of boats that you can enter for. And there are prizes given for the best preserved or the best presented in each class.
I noticed the sign says traditional boat rally and jumble. What's that all about?
These have become very popular in the last 10 years, boat jumbles, where people come along with a stall, rather like a boot sale, but sell maritime effects. And some are new gear, which is cheap, and some is old gear that people have dragged out of their boathouses and their works. And sometimes you can pick up bargains, and sometimes you can't.
This was the only event I have been to this year where there wasn't a queue for the ladies. There were prizes for fancy dress as well as the boats.
Indeed, and we have a goblet, one of the rally goblets, some chocolates, and here for Ned, everything you need for school activities, apart from a mobile phone. Sue, thank you. Ned, hope to see you at many more rallies.
Can anyone join the Thames Society, or do they have to have a boat?
Anybody can join the River Thames Society. In fact, we're perceived as a society of boat owners, but we would prefer not to be. We would like anglers, we would like walkers, we would like bird watchers, we would like oarsmen. Anybody can join the River Thames Society, and the best way to do it is to walk down to your nearest lock, and they will have a leaflet and a poster telling you how to do it. £15 a year, with a wonderful magazine 4 times a year, and a membership of a local branch which runs a series of activities and outings with like-minded people, which provide social and educational expertise and activities for everybody concerned. And as I say, we don't want just boat owners, we want bird watchers and fishermen, because they are as much a part of the Thames Valley as we are.
We're on the last part of our journey down to Windsor. We're here at Marlow, about to board the press launch to follow the ancient ritual of swan upping on the Thames.
In order to follow swan upping, we are about to travel back upriver from Marlow to Henley, a small price to pay, we felt, for the privilege. David Barber is the Queen's swan marker and organiser of this unique annual event.
David, what is swan upping?
Swan upping is the way that we monitor the welfare of the Thames swans. It does stem back to the 12th century, and when the swans then were eaten for the table. But today it's more of a conservation exercise where we actually go up the river, we remove the young broods of cygnets from their parent birds, we examine them, we ring them, and then we place them back in the water. We also have Professor Perrins, the Queen's Swan Warden, who comes along and gives them a thorough health check. So it is a way of monitoring the Thames swans for the future.
Well, basically we do two sorts of things. One is just keeping the records of how well they're doing this year, how many cygnets they've got this year, whether they're okay, and that means just checking them over for health and usually taking fish hooks out of a few of them because they often get caught up in tackle. But then in the longer term we're keeping records of the breeding pairs to look at the adult survival rates, and that's something that takes obviously quite a few years to accumulate.
With the heavy wet winter, what do you expect to find this year in the numbers?
Well, so far this week the numbers have been down around about 18%, but I think today, the numbers, we should have a little bit better day today than last year. So hopefully by the end of the week we'll be probably about 10% down, but I don't think it'll be disastrous.
The time that high water catches them out is in the spring because it floods a lot of nests, and although they may re-nest, many of them don't. So particularly 3 years ago in '98, we lost a lot of nests in the very big May floods, but the winter floods probably don't affect them too badly. Winter cold does affect the cygnet survival a bit. Most of the birds start laying in late March through April. They take 5 weeks to hatch their cygnets, so end of May into June is when the peak hatch happens. So the average brood is probably 6 or 7 weeks old now, but there's always some tiddlers.
During swan upping we do invite quite a lot of small school children along, as we have here today, with a lot of vandalism and shootings and stonings of young cygnets, which is quite surprising in this day and age. We're trying to educate the young children to actually respect the water, respect the wildlife,
and in try and encourage them into a conservation attitude.
6 traditional rowing skiffs containing 19 men comprise the Swan Uppers. Besides the Queen's boats, the others belong to the Vintners and Dyers, 2 City of London livery companies who were granted rights to own swans in the 15th century. The cry, "all up," means that a brood of swans has been sighted already. This means we have to board the press launch as quickly as possible to follow. On our morning's ride, we share the Argonaut with a Brazilian news crew, London Network News and journalists. The skiffs encircle the birds, and they are lifted out of the water one by one, their feet tied with twine and laid side by side on the bank. The cygnets are weighed and checked for fishing hooks and other injuries.
This one's got Vintners or Dyers, so it's the first record of a ring breeding.
Z1 is 89806. Hang on.
Robin, the head measurements 124, 125, 123, 130. 123. They're done, thank you.
More children were waiting on the bank beside Bisham Church. Our skipper today is Steve Bill. We are passing Bisham Abbey, the Sports Council's National Recreation Centre. The Tudor house was built with fragments of the old abbey. Ahead is Temple Lock.
This is great.
Jeremy, hold tight.
Jeremy, hold tight.
Are you crewing today, Jim?
I am.
Today I think we have another 4 broods, 4 to 5 broods of swans, that is the family of swans. Where they all are, we don't actually know, so it cannot be pre-arranged, you know. They could be up a little back creek or on the main river, we just don't know where they are.
The oarsmen take a break to conserve their strength and take a tow for a while. As we approach Hurley Lock, we are all on the lookout for any more swans.
No swans in there. No's coming out, that's what we're over here for.
Give him probably a bit of practice in case he goes in the Queen's boat next year.
I'll go this side, shall I?
Why don't you go this side?
Okay, since I'm over here...
Well, you might as well stay there.
The chances of getting it in on this side are as risky as the other side.
Good morning.
Make sure we get there.
Especially, for instance, they use the tools using also silencia.
This morning we are joined by members of the Dyers Livery Company, who have chartered a steamboat to follow the flotilla to Henley. David Barber takes a brief moment to meet some of the members.
Tell us a bit about the boat itself.
This is a 50-foot umpire launch that you're on. They use them at Henley for the Royal Regatta. What you find with these are the new ones, so they got a fiberglass hull. These were built by the regatta, for the regatta, so you're sitting on a 1993 boat, even though it's built in traditional looks. The oldest one is still in Henley, 1913. And Hobbs of Henley have still got that one, and he still uses it in Chantries. And one of the reasons that I had to build the new ones was that the rowing is getting stronger and faster, and the older launches with the old engines couldn't keep up. So it was a bit interesting coming off the start. If you didn't come off before them, you couldn't keep up with them. At least now with the new boats, you can catch them, so it's not a problem.
How long have you been working with the Swan Upping?
This is the 5th year that I've actually been doing this particular job, which is cruising the launch. Ever since David Barber has tried to get people aware of swan preservation, really. That's a good idea. Gets the press on board and they can see what it's all about. That's the Hellfire Club.
On the right stands romantic Medmenham Abbey, with its association with Sir Francis Dashwood and the notorious Hellfire Club.
Oh, I'm no good at history. All I know is you're supposed to strip off and run around naked in there, isn't it, or something?
The flotilla is approaching Hambledon Lock. Another brood has been sighted. The skiffs encircle the swans, gradually closing the circle and herding the birds towards the riverbank.
Hey, look, Wayne, come over on here.
Tradições que se repetem há séculos, mas francamente, na hora que eles pegam.
The parent birds are unmarked, indicating they belong to the Queen. Members of the Dyers Company gather round.
I gather that so far this week it hasn't been as poor as you'd feared.
Not quite, no.
And that you have managed to find some broods, and I'm happy that we've found a brood relatively quickly today, and I'm sure we'll find some more further up the river. Without further ado, perhaps you'd like to continue. Can I give you that to distribute amongst...
Yes. Swan uppers, 3 cheers for the Dyers Company.
Hip hip!
Hooray!
Hip hip!
Hooray!
Hip hip!
Hooray! Now these brood of swans are queen swans. Both the parents are unmarked. Mr. Barber has graciously allowed the Dyers Company to mark 2 for the company. I will now mark our birds, and Professor Perrins will weigh and mark them, all the other birds.
Where's the number?
Just there. 0132.
That's great.
Fitzgerald.
apparently if they can all see each other and hear each other, then they'll settle down. It's not so threatening. But they're only about 3 months old. I think if I were 3 months old, it'd be a bit scary.
You're not getting a start on the Henley course. You're not having a start on the Henley course. We go even Steven. Get up! We're not giving you a start. You leave our boat alone.
You're having a race then.
I think there was a bit of cheating going on there.
This imposing building is Henley Management College, which reminds us we are approaching the famous Regatta Reach.
It's an Al Johnson little number they're singing.
The school children have come from the lock to watch the marking of the swans.
How is it, son?
Lovely and soft.
She's molting.
Thank you.
They're all molting, you see that.
Thank you.
This is a rare opportunity to learn close up about the birds.
So they were given a right by the Crown, a royal charter to own swans. As time went on, people didn't bother to eat swans anymore. It became out of favour.
Well, you stroked a swan.
And I've got a swan feather.
And the weather was on your side. So you've done well. And I think you've probably got your good focus on that one.
We are passing Temple Island for the home reach to Henley. It feels exhilarating to be alongside the racing lanes, which were filled with competing rowers less than 2 weeks ago at the regatta. It was worth retracing our steps to observe this wonderful and educational pageant. Back at Marlow, we turn again downriver towards our journey's end, Windsor. Marlow, like Henley, has its rowing traditions. Their local hero is 5-time Olympic winner Sir Stephen Redgrave. Marlow's classic suspension bridge, opened in 1832, was designed by William Tierney Clark after his success earlier with Hammersmith Bridge. Higginson Park and Sports Centre are the town's waterside recreation area. There is no towpath from Marlow Bridge to the lock, and barges had to be manhandled or hauled on a long tow rope. The horses had to be taken along a circuitous route called Seven Corners Alley, which the Thames path now follows. The reach at Bourne End is a favourite for dinghy sailing. The Thames path runs through Bourne End Marina. This footbridge attached to the railway bridge gives access to National Trust-owned Cock Marsh. This expanse of grassy marshland between Winter Hill and the Thames has been common land since 1272 and is still grazed in the traditional manner. This is the river frontage at Cookham. Just below Cookham Bridge, the Thames blossoms into 4 channels. The Astors of Clifton were instrumental in preserving Cookham with relatively little change over the decades. Kenneth Graham wrote Wind in the Willows whilst living at Cookham Dean. Cookham was home to the painter Sir Stanley Spencer. Not far from Cookham is Clifton, perched high on the steep tree-lined bank. The present house was built for and by the Astors in the 1840s on the site of 2 previous mansions, both destroyed by fire. Clifton Reach is one of the loveliest on the Thames, providing delightful vistas through the trees. At Maidenhead. This is Bolter's Lock, famous to present day for lock watching. Its heyday was before the First World War, when hordes of visitors came here to see the pageants, carnivals and regattas. In recent years, there has been a decline in the use of the whole length of the river. The Environment Agency has launched an initiative called Thames Ahead. John Redman explains.
Our first plans are to raise the profile of the Thames put the Thames back on the map, if you like. It is, without doubt, one of the most famous waterways in the world, and it has attracted generation after generation of leisure user. In the last few years, I've actually seen a decline in those numbers, and when we've carried out some market research, we found that an awful lot of newcomers to the Thames Valley and people in the vicinity have sort of missed the trick that the Thames is on the doorstep, and what we're saying is that we think probably we've all taken it for granted too long.
What steps have the Environment Agency taken?
Our first step was clearly to get the backing of the key players who are interested in the health and wealth of the Thames. That's the local authorities, Southern Tourist Board, the trade, boating press, and the river users themselves. Having got that support, we decided to publicise the very fact that the Thames exists in a number of ways. We've taken out travel journalists and shown them the joys of the river. We've launched a website, visitthames.co.uk as our plug. We have launched a tourism leaflet in conjunction with the Southern Tourist Board. We've opened an information line. So we're taking a number of steps to make sure that as far as wide as possible, people know that the Thames exists, that it's accessible, that it's easy to get onto, it's easy to get alongside of, and it's fun to be there. The cost of maintaining infrastructure of the river is extraordinary, and the lock you're looking at and the road bridge over the lock last year cost the agency some several £100,000 simply to maintain in it looking just the way it is today. You'll see nothing new, hopefully you'll see nothing different, but in fact it was all falling down. Water is a very destructive medium, and anything we build today will have to be rebuilt again in 50, 60 or 100 years' time, and that is a very, very expensive operation, and we need more resource to be able to do better.
The arrival of the railway in Victorian times brought popularity to Maidenhead, and it soon became a fashionable leisure resort. Brunel's railway bridge has the longest and flattest brick arches in the world. Not far downriver is another impressive bridge carrying the M4 motorway across the Thames. This is Dorney Reach. Very close to the Thames is Dorney Lake, a new and vast 200-metre rowing facility financed and built by Eton College. Boveney Lock is said to be located by the site of an old fishery. The first lock here was built in 1838. The lock you see today was built alongside the old one. We are now very close to Windsor. The racecourse is on the opposite bank of the lock. This is our first glimpse of imposing Windsor Castle. We are nearing our journey's end. There are signs we have left the rural reaches and peaceful paths of the Upper Thames behind. The Thames has matured here from the infant stream we found in Gloucestershire, its childhood at Lechlade, and its adolescence at Oxford. Its character has changed, and the intimacy we have known is gone. The river has become royal and commercial and magnificent, flowing on to become our nation's most famous river, and world famous for the role it has played throughout Britain's long history.
Well, we've made it. 110 miles journey. We haven't walked all the way, but we've gone lots of different craft. What did you like most about it?
I think the thing that has struck me about the Thames has been the love of the Thames for the people that work on it or live by it and who visit it. I just was amazed at the fascination, the fondness for it. It seems it gets in your blood.
Somehow the Thames just gets me, you know, and I just can't imagine living anywhere too far away from it, you know.
Oh, it's in the blood, isn't it?
It's the only river for me, really. You know, I just like it. It's something different happens all the time.
To me, it's brilliant. You know, it's a moral way of life.
It's accessible, but it's easy to get onto, it's easy to get alongside of, and it's fun to be there.
Coming back to the Thames, it makes you appreciate how wonderful a river it is.
The whole pace of life just slows down. That's what it is, really. And of course, it's a very historic river, but at the end of the day, it's all about enjoying it.
What about you?
It's photography, really. Every corner you turn, there's a beautiful scene. Even on a cloudy day like today, there's pictures of swans, wildlife, lovely old boats. It's been a real pleasure.
And the people too.
Yeah.